Get out! Now! Vivian Thompson, 40, sleek and white, barks, her voice trembling with desperation as she conceals the splendor of the Thompson mansion, shrouding its opulent light in a cold, unforgiving curtain. Naomi Carter, 30, black, clutches, her suitcase resolutely, the rain soaking her simple uniform, her face unwavering. Eli rushes to hug Naomi, his cry piercing the storm. "Mom, don't go!" Why does a nanny's love threaten Vivian's perfect world? What truths does Eli's defiance reveal? Welcome to our stories, profound lessons against privilege. Sign up to follow this fascinating journey and comment. Where are you watching? Will Naomi's hidden heroism break Vivian's lie, or will the rain bury her truth? Watch to discover. A love that redefines everything. Naomi kneels, embracing Eli, her eyes shining with unwavering solemnity. The story begins now. The Thompson mansion glittered under a late afternoon sun, its marble facade gleaming like a polished jewel in the heart of an elite enclave. Inside, the ballroom was a symphony of extravagance. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across white linens. Silver trays overflowed with macarons and gold-dusted cupcakes, and a 5-tiered cake stood like a monument to perfection, its icing roses sculpted with surgical precision. Guests in tailored suits and silk gowns floated through the space, their laughter rising in delicate waves. Each clink of champagne flutes a note in a carefully orchestrated performance. This was no ordinary celebration. It was Eli Thompson's 7th birthday, a showcase of wealth and status as much as a child's milestone. At the center of it all stood Vivian Thompson, a vision of curated elegance, her blonde hair swept into an immaculate updo, her white dress clinging like a second skin. Her smile was flawless, but her eyes betrayed a hunger for something more than joy. Approval. Vivian stepped to a sleek podium, her manicured fingers brushing the microphone as the jazz trio softened to a hum. The crowd hushed, their faces turned toward her like sunflowers chasing light. Eli, frail and wide-eyed in a miniature navy suit, fidgeted beside the cake, his asthma inhaler tucked discreetly in his pocket. His gaze darted not to his mother, but to the edge of the room where Naomi Carter stood, a quiet pillar in a plain navy uniform. Her dark skin glowed softly under the chandelier's light, her hands steady around a tray of cupcakes, her eyes warm with a tenderness that seemed out of place in this sterile grandeur. Eli's lips curved into a shy smile, and Naomi returned a subtle wink, a secret language forged in countless quiet moments. "Thank you all for celebrating Eli's 7th birthday," Vivian began, her voice smooth as velvet, each word measured to charm. "Growing up, I learned family is what you make it. Perfect, unbreakable." Her smile tightened, a flicker of something raw crossing her face, as if the words stirred a memory of a childhood spent chasing affection that never came. She pressed on, her tone swelling with practiced emotion. 3 years ago, I held my son in that hospital, praying he'd breathe again. I fought for him, and here he is, our miracle." The guests erupted in polite applause, their pearls shimmering, their nods approving. A socialite in a pearl-encrusted gown leaned to her companion, whispering, "Vivian's such an inspiration." Vivian's eyes flicked to her, drinking in the praise like water in a desert, her grip on the podium tightening as if anchoring her to this moment of triumph. But the lie hung heavy in the air, unnoticed by most. Naomi's face remained unreadable, her tray steady, though her fingers curled slightly around its edges. She'd been there that night in the hospital, her hands, not Vivian's, coaxing life back into Eli's lungs as monitors screamed, and Vivian paced a corridor, distracted by a phone call about a fundraiser. Naomi's heart had pounded with fear, then relief, as Eli's wheezes softened under her care. Yet here, in this glittering cage, Vivian claimed that victory as her own, erasing Naomi's existence with a smile. Naomi lowered her gaze, her breath steady, her silence a shield forged from years of grief and resilience. Eli, clutching a red balloon, squirmed under his mother's shadow. Vivian stepped down from the podium, gliding toward him, her heels clicking like a metronome. She knelt, briefly, adjusting his tie with a touch that was more performance than affection. "Stay close, darling," she murmured, her voice low but strained, her eyes darting to Naomi across the room. "We don't want a scene today." Eli nodded, but his gaze drifted back to Naomi, his small hand twitching as if yearning to reach for her. Vivian's smile faltered, a flash of jealousy darkening her features. She straightened, her hand lingering on Eli's shoulder, gripping just tightly enough to betray her unease. To her, Naomi was the help, efficient, invisible, replaceable. But to Eli, she was the one who sang Haitian lullabies through his fevers, who knew the exact tilt of his inhaler, who made the world feel safe. Across the room, Dr. Lydia Moreno stood among the guests, her tailored blazer a stark contrast to the sea of sequins. Her sharp eyes narrowed as she watched Vivian's speech, her memory stirring like a storm on the horizon. She leaned toward a nearby guest, her voice low, urgent. "That's not how I remember it," she said, her gaze locking on Naomi. "That woman, she was the one in the ER." The guest raised an eyebrow, but Lydia's words were swallowed by the crowd's chatter. Naomi caught Lydia's look, a fleeting connection that sent a shiver down her spine. For a moment, her composure wavered, her eyes betraying a flicker of fear, then resolve. She turned away, wiping a smudge of frosting from Eli's cheek as he slipped closer to her, unnoticed by the guests. The gesture was small, tender, a universe of love in a single touch. Vivian circulated among her elite circle, her laugh lilting, her anecdotes polished. She didn't speak of Naomi, didn't need to. In this world, some people were decoration, others were invisible. A guest, a tech mogul with a Rolex glinting, leaned in. "Vivian, your boy's such a darling, so well-behaved," he said. Vivian glowed, her voice dripping with practiced humility. "We've worked hard to raise him right," she replied, her eyes avoiding Eli, who clutched his balloon tighter, his gaze still on Naomi. The socialite nodded again, her approval a currency Vivian craved. Yet beneath her poised exterior, a crack formed, a fear that her carefully crafted image could unravel with a single misstep, a single truth. The ballroom pulsed with privilege, each guest a thread in Vivian's tapestry of perfection. A framed photo on the dessert table captured her holding a smiling Eli, curated to tell a story of maternal devotion. But behind it, Naomi moved like a shadow, refilling juice, smoothing Eli's collar, her presence a quiet rebellion against the lie. The jazz trio played on, their notes weaving through the clink of glasses and the hum of polite conversation. Eli's balloon bobbed, a speck of red in a sea of white and gold, a reminder of the boy caught between two worlds, one of appearances, one of love. As the cake was wheeled forward, candles flickering like stars, the room held its breath, unaware of the fault line beneath their feet, ready to split open with a child's unfiltered truth. The air in Port-au-Prince was thick with heat and the sharp tang of antiseptic, a relentless pulse of life and loss thrumming through the hospital's overcrowded emergency room. Sodium vapor lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on cracked linoleum floors. Naomi Carter, barely 30, moved like a force of nature through the chaos, her white coat stained with sweat and blood, her hands steady as she threaded an IV into a trembling child's arm. Her eyes, dark and fierce, held a fire that refused to flicker, even as shouts and moans filled the air. She was a resident doctor, a rising star in Haiti's medical world, her name whispered with reverence by nurses who saw her save lives others deemed lost. Tonight, though, the weight of destiny hung heavier than usual, a storm brewing beyond the hospital's peeling walls. A gurney crashed through the doors, carrying a VIP, a politician's son, pale and seizing, his chest heaving against a failing heart. Naomi sprang into action, her voice cutting through the din like a blade. "Get me epinephrine now," she barked, her hands flying to stabilize him. Nurses scrambled, monitors wailed, and the room shrank to the space between her and the patient. She fought with every ounce of her training, her brow furrowed, her breath sinking with the rhythm of the defibrillator. But the boy's pulse flatlined, his body still despite her relentless compressions. A senior doctor, his face a mask of cold authority, pushed through the crowd. "You ignored protocol," he said, his voice low, accusing, as he glanced at the politician's aide in the corner. Naomi's chest tightened, her protest drowned by the man's dismissal. "You're done here, Carter." The words landed like a guillotine, severing her career in an instant. She stumbled into the hospital corridor, her coat stripped away, her hands trembling as she clutched a crumpled badge. The accusation was a lie. She'd followed every protocol, but the truth didn't matter in a world where power wrote the story. Outside, the night was a canvas of stars, indifferent to her unraveling. Naomi's knees buckled as she leaned against a graffiti-scarred wall, her sobs swallowed by the distant hum of cicadas. She wasn't just a doctor anymore. She was a scapegoat, her dreams buried under the weight of a system that favored influence over integrity. But the worst was yet to come, a wound deeper than any professional betrayal could carve. Months later, Naomi knelt beside a small bed in a cramped apartment, the air heavy with the scent of mangoes and despair. Her daughter, Leora, 4 years, old with eyes like her mother's, lay feverish, her tiny chest rattling with each labored breath. Naomi's hands, once steady in the ER, shook as she pressed a damp cloth to Leora's forehead, singing a Haitian lullaby in a voice cracked with desperation. "Mwen renmen u dike," she whispered, her heart fracturing with every cough. She'd taken Leora to the same hospital, begging for a doctor to see her sooner. But the staff, still bitter from her disgrace, waved her off. "Wait your turn," they said, their eyes cold. Hours dragged, each tick of the clock a theft of hope. By the time a doctor arrived, Leora's lips were blue, her body limp. Sepsis had stolen her, swift and merciless, leaving Naomi clutching a lifeless hand under fluorescent lights that burned too bright. The world went silent, then exploded in her chest. Naomi's scream was swallowed by the sterile walls, her knees hitting the floor as nurses looked away. She held Leora's favorite stuffed rabbit, its fur worn from countless hugs, and pressed it to her face, inhaling the fading scent of her daughter. The hospital faded, replaced by a gravestone under a mango tree, etched with Leora Carter 2015-2019. Naomi knelt there, her fingers tracing the name, a child's drawing tucked in her pocket, a stick figure of a girl and her mother under, a smiling son. "I couldn't save you, baby," she whispered, her voice a ghost in the humid air. The stars above offered no comfort, only a reminder of a light snuffed out too soon. She couldn't stay in Haiti. The hospital's betrayal, Leora's death, the weight of a life dismantled. It was too much. Naomi boarded a plane to the U.S., her suitcase light but her heart heavy, the drawing now creased from countless quiet touches. She landed in a city of glass and steel, a world as foreign as her grief. Becoming a nanny wasn't a choice but a necessity, a way to pour her unspent love into children who weren't hers. She found Eli Thompson, a boy whose wheezes echoed Leora's, whose wide eyes held the same spark. In his small, fragile frame, she saw a chance to mother again, not to replace her daughter but to keep her heart open, to let love breathe where pain had carved its home. Naomi's hands, once skilled with scalpels, now folded tiny shirts and adjusted inhalers. She learned Eli's rhythms, the way his breath hitched before a cough, the way he smiled when she sang her lullabies. She didn't speak of Leora, didn't need to. Her love for Eli was a silent prayer, each gentle touch a vow to protect what she could, even if it meant standing in the shadows of a mansion that saw her as less. The drawing stayed in her pocket, a talisman of loss and purpose, its edges soft from her fingers' quiet worship. In the Thompson household, she was invisible to all but Eli, who saw her not as a nanny, but as a beacon, a warmth no wealth could buy. The past clung to Naomi like the humid Haitian air, a weight she carried with grace. She didn't dream of reclaiming her title as a doctor. She dreamed of Leora's laugh, of a world where love wasn't erased by lies. As she stepped into the Thompson mansion, her navy uniform a stark contrast to its opulence. She carried a truth no one could steal. She was a mother not by blood but by heart, and that was a fire no betrayal could extinguish. The morning sun slipped through the gauzy curtains of Eli Thompson's room, painting pale gold stripes across a sea of navy blue walls adorned with hand-drawn stars. The space was a sanctuary of boyish chaos, crayons scattered across a low table, a half-built Lego spaceship teetering on a shelf, and a stuffed rabbit tucked into the corner of a neatly made bed. The air carried the faint sweetness of apple juice and the sterile edge of an asthma inhaler, a reminder of the fragility beneath the room's warmth. Naomi Carter knelt beside Eli, her hands gentle as she adjusted the inhaler against his small, trembling lips. His wheezes were soft but persistent, each breath a quiet battle. Her dark eyes, steady with a mother's instinct, held his gaze, anchoring him through the storm in his chest. "Slow, sweet boy," she murmured, her voice a low melody, laced with the cadence of a Haitian lullaby. In and out like the waves. Eli, 7 and slight, his brown curls damp with sweat, leaned into her touch, his small hand clutching hers. The inhaler hissed, mist curling into his lungs and his breathing eased, a faint smile breaking through his pale face. "You always make it better, Naomi," he whispered, his voice a fragile thread of trust. Naomi's lips curved, her fingers brushing a curl from his forehead. "That's because you're my brave boy," she said, her words wrapping him in a warmth the mansion's marble halls could never muster. She began to hum, a soft lilting tune from her childhood, the notes weaving a cocoon around them. This moment, the room was theirs, a haven where love didn't need permission. The door swung open, its hinges silent, but the intrusion was sharp. Vivian Thompson stood in the threshold, her silhouette framed by the hallway's cold light. Her blonde hair was pinned with precision, her cream silk blouse a stark contrast to Naomi's navy uniform. Her heels clicked once, twice, then stopped, as if the room's intimacy was a trespass she couldn't quite cross. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, flicked from Eli to Naomi, lingering on their joined hands. A shadow crossed her face, not anger, but something deeper, a flicker of envy that cut sharper than disdain. "Naomi," she said, her voice smooth but edged, like a blade wrapped in velvet. "The navy uniform for the party. Nothing bright, and make sure Eli's presentable." Naomi nodded, her face a mask of calm. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, her tone even, her eyes never leaving Eli's. She released his hand gently, rising to adjust his sweater, her movements deliberate, tender. Eli frowned, his small frame tensing as he glanced at his mother. "I like Naomi's songs," he said, his voice defiant, a spark of rebellion in his wide eyes. Vivian's smile tightened, her fingers twitching at her side as if resisting the urge to reclaim something she'd never fully held. "Eli, darling," she said, stepping closer, her heels clicking like a metronome. "I gave up my career for your health. Naomi's here to assist, not—" She paused, the word replace unspoken but heavy in the air. She reached out, adjusting Eli's collar herself, her touch precise but lacking warmth. Eli pulled away slightly, his eyes darting back to Naomi, seeking her steadiness. Vivian's hand froze mid-air, her composure cracking like thin ice. She straightened, her gaze locking onto Naomi, who stood silently, folding a towel with practiced ease. "You're not his mother," Vivian said, her voice low, a warning wrapped in politeness. "Don't forget your place." The words were a lash meant to wound, but Naomi's face remained unreadable, her hands steady. Only the slight tightening of her jaw betrayed the sting. She knew her place in this house, silent, invisible, a shadow in Vivian's world of curated perfection. But to Eli, she was the son, the one who knew the exact angle of his inhaler, the one who sang away his fears in the dark. Vivian turned to leave, her heels echoing down the hall, but paused at the door, glancing back. "The party starts at 3, she said, her tone clipped. "No mistakes, Naomi. The door closed, leaving a chill in its wake. Eli scrambled off the bed, barreling into Naomi's legs, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I don't want the party," he mumbled into her skirt, his voice muffled. "I just want you." Naomi knelt, cupping his face, her thumb brushing away a tear he hadn't yet shed. "We'll get through it, sweet boy," she whispered, her voice thick with love and something heavier. Grief, perhaps, for a role she could never claim, for a daughter whose absence lingered in every lullaby. In her pocket, Naomi's fingers brushed the edge of a worn drawing, its creases soft from years of quiet handling. It was Leora's, a stick figure mother and daughter under a smiling sun, a relic of a life stolen by sepsis and betrayal. She didn't pull it out, didn't need to. Eli's warmth against her was enough, a fragile echo of the love she'd lost. She hummed again, the lullaby filling the room, its notes a defiance against Vivian's cold command. The stars on the walls seemed to glow brighter, as if bearing witness to a bond no wealth could break. Outside, the mansion buzzed with preparations, florists arranging imported lilies, caterers polishing silver trays, all for Vivian's spectacle of a party. But in this small room, Naomi and Eli were a world apart, their connection a quiet rebellion against the house's sterile grandeur. Naomi smoothed Eli's sweater, her hand steady despite the ache in her chest. She knew the rules of this place. Smile when spoken to, fade into the background, never overstep. Yet every touch, every song was a claim to something deeper, something Vivian could never touch. As the clock ticked toward the party, the air held a tension unspoken, a fault line waiting for a child's truth to shatter it. The ballroom of the Thompson mansion glowed like a cathedral of wealth, its chandeliers dripping light onto pristine linens and silver trays laden with delicacies. The air thrummed with the clink of crystal flutes and the velvet notes of a jazz trio, each chord a delicate stitch in the fabric of Eli Thompson's 7th birthday celebration. Guests in shimmering gowns and crisp tuxedos wove through the space, their laughter a polished performance, their smiles sharp with social ambition. At the room's heart stood a towering cake, its sugar roses glistening like jewels, a testament to Vivian Thompson's relentless pursuit of perfection. Eli, 7 and fragile, stood in a navy suit that hung slightly too large, his fingers clutching a red balloon, its string a lifeline in the sea of opulence. His eyes, wide and restless, sought not his mother, but Naomi Carter, who stood at the room's edge, her navy uniform blending into the shadows, her hands steady around a tray of sparkling juice. Vivian moved through the crowd like a queen, her white silk dress catching the light, her blonde hair a crown of precision. Her smile was a masterpiece, but her eyes betrayed a hunger for validation, a need rooted in a childhood starved of warmth. She paused to accept a nod from a socialite, her pearl necklace gleaming as she murmured, "Vivian's a marvel, isn't she?" Vivian's chest swelled, her gaze flickering to the woman, soaking in the praise like a parched field under rain. Earlier, she'd claimed Eli's survival as her own, her speech painting her as the heroic mother who saved her son from an asthma attack. The lie hung in the air, invisible to the guests, but heavy on Naomi, who stood silent, her tray a shield, against the erasure of her truth. She'd been the one in the ER, her hands coaxing breath back into Eli's lungs while Vivian paced a corridor, lost in a phone call about status. Eli stood near the cake, his balloon bobbing, his small frame tense under Vivian's watchful eye. She'd positioned him there, a prop in her narrative, her hand resting on his shoulder with a grip that felt more like control than love. "Stay by me, darling," she'd whispered earlier, her voice tight with the fear of a misstep in her. Perfect world. Eli's gaze drifted to Naomi, who was refilling a guest's glass, her movements fluid, her face calm, but her eyes warm with a love that needed no spotlight. To Eli, she was the one who sang through his fevers, who knew the exact tilt of his inhaler, who made the mansion's cold walls feel like home. His fingers twitched, the balloon string slipping slightly, as if his heart were pulling him toward her. Then it happened, a spark igniting a wildfire. Eli's eyes locked on Naomi as she wiped a stray crumb from a table, her presence a quiet beacon in the room's glitter. He broke free from Vivian's side, his small feet pounding across the marble floor, the balloon trailing like a comet. "Ko Naomi moi la mekon," he shouted, his voice a clear, defiant bell cutting through the jazz and chatter. The baidimo room froze, as if time itself had stumbled. Glasses paused mid-air, a woman's gasp sliced the silence, and a man's champagne splashed onto his cuff. The socialite's eyebrow arched, her whisper dying in her throat. Vivian's face drained of color, her smile crumbling like brittle plaster, her eyes wide with the horror of her carefully crafted image unraveling. Naomi stood rooted, her tray trembling for a split second before her hands steadied it. Her eyes met Eli's, a storm of love and fear swirling within them. She knelt, setting the tray on a nearby table, her navy dress brushing the floor as she reached for him. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her voice a soft anchor. "It's okay." Eli barreled into her, his arms wrapping around her waist, smearing frosting across her uniform. "You're my real mom," he said, his voice quieter now, muffled against her, his balloon bobbing above them like a defiant heart. The crowd's murmurs grew, a ripple of shock spreading like wildfire. A guest whispered, "Did he just say that?" Another raised a phone, the red dot of a recording blinking. Vivian's laugh pierced the tension, high and sharp, a desperate attempt to mend the fracture. "He's just excited," she said, her voice quivering, her eyes darting to the socialite. "Pleading for belief. Naomi's our nanny, that's all." But the words rang hollow, drowned by the weight of Eli's truth. She stepped forward, her heels clicking like gunfire, her hand reaching for Eli. "Come here, Eli," she said, her tone sharp, barely masking her fury. "You know better." Eli clung tighter to Naomi, his small body a shield against his mother's. "Command." The socialite leaned to her companion, her voice low. "This is embarrassing." Vivian's heart sank, her worst fear realized. A public stain on her perfect facade. Naomi rose, her hand resting gently on Eli's back, rubbing small circles that spoke of a bond deeper than words. "I see you've got that sweet tooth again," she said softly, her voice steady despite the chaos, her eyes glistening with unspoken pain. The jazz trio faltered, then resumed, its notes a frail attempt to restore order. Vivian pulled Eli back to her side, her smile a fragile mask, her hand trembling on his shoulder. The balloon bobbed between them, a red pulse in a world of white and gold, a symbol of a truth too pure to be silenced. The guests turned back to their drinks, their whispers sharper now, like shards of glass. From the crowd, Dr. Lydia Moreno watched, her eyes narrowing, her memory of Naomi's heroism in the ER burning bright, a spark waiting to ignite the truth. The hospital parking lot was a canvas of shadows, lit only by the cold flicker of sodium streetlights in the distant twinkle of stars above a city that never slept. Rain had fallen earlier, leaving the asphalt slick, reflecting fractured beams of light like a broken mirror. Naomi Carter sat on a weathered bench, her navy uniform damp at the edges, her suitcase resting at her feet like a silent companion. Her hands, usually steady from years of wielding scalpels and soothing fevers, clasped a worn photograph, its edges soft from countless quiet touches. Leora's face, 4 years old, eyes like her mother's, smiling under a Haitian sun, stared back, a wound that never closed. Naomi's breath hitched, her eyes tracing the stars above, as if they held answers to questions she'd stopped asking. The night was heavy, the air thick with the scent of wet pavement and the faint hum of the hospital's generators, a reminder of the life she'd lost. Footsteps broke the silence, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the stillness like a warning. Dr. Lydia Moreno emerged from the hospital's glow, her tailored blazer a stark contrast to the lot's grimness, her dark hair pulled into a sleek twist. Her eyes, sharp and resolute, softened as they landed on Naomi, who looked up startled, her photograph slipping back into her pocket. Lydia's presence was a jolt, a reminder of the ER 3 years ago, where Naomi's hands had saved Eli while Lydia watched, powerless to intervene in the chaos. "Naomi," Lydia said, her voice firm but warm, like a hand extended in the dark. She held a USB drive and a thin folder, their edges catching the streetlight's glow. "I've been looking for you." Naomi's gaze flickered to the items, her heart quickening. "What's this?" she asked, her voice low, guarded, as if bracing for another betrayal. Lydia sat beside her, the bench creaking under their shared weight. "It's the truth," she said, her tone fierce yet empathetic. "ER footage from that night. You saved Eli's life, not Vivian. The record's in here." She tapped the folder. "Prove it. Dates, times, your name on the chart." Naomi's breath caught, her fingers brushing the folder, then pulling back as if it burned. Memories flooded in. The hospital's chaos, Eli's wheezes, her hands moving with desperate precision while Vivian stood absent, distracted by ambition. "Why now?" Naomi whispered, her eyes searching Lydia's face, fear and hope warring within her. Lydia leaned closer, her voice dropping to a fervent hush. "Because you deserve to be seen. I was there, Naomi. I saw you fight for him when no one else did. You could clear your name, go back to medicine." She pressed the USB into Naomi's hand, her grip steady, unyielding. "You're not invisible, not to me." Naomi's fingers closed around the drive, her throat tightening. The stars above seemed to pulse, echoing the heartbeat of a dream she'd buried in Haiti. A dream shattered by a false accusation, a lost daughter, a life reduced to shadows. "What's the point?" she said, her voice cracking, heavy with the weight of Leora's absence. "They'll never see me. Not really." Before Lydia could respond, a shadow loomed, sharp heels clicking against the wet asphalt. Vivian Thompson stepped into the light, her cream coat pristine despite the night's damp, her face a mask of controlled fury. Her eyes flicked from Naomi to Lydia, then to the USB, her lips thinning. "What's this?" she demanded, her voice low, venomous, each word a calculated strike. "You think you can expose me, Naomi? I built this family's name. Without—" Eli would have nothing. Her hands trembled, betraying the fear beneath her composure, fear of losing the social throne she'd crafted through lies. Naomi stood, her suitcase at her side, her gaze steady despite the storm in her chest. "I'm not here to fight, ma'am," she said, her voice quiet but resolute, a shield forged from years of silence. Vivian's eyes narrowed, her posture rigid, as if the parking lot were her ballroom and she still held the stage. "Stay. In your place," she hissed, her words slicing through the night. "You're the help, nothing more." Lydia rose, her blazer catching the light, her voice cutting through Vivian's venom. "She's more than you'll ever admit," she said, her tone fierce, unyielding. "You weren't there when Eli couldn't breathe. She was." Vivian's face paled, her fingers twitching as if to snatch the USB, but she froze, her eyes darting to the hospital's entrance where a security guard lingered, oblivious. The moment stretched, taut as a wire, the air thick with unspoken truths. Naomi clutched the USB, her resolve flickering like a candle in the wind. The photograph in her pocket felt heavier, Leora's smile a silent plea to keep fighting, to reclaim what was stolen. But fear of another betrayal, of a world that erased her, held her back. "I need time," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the city. Lydia nodded, her eyes soft but determined. "Take it, but don't let her silence you." Vivian turned on her heel, her coat billowing, her silence a warning as she vanished into the night. Naomi sat back on the bench, the USB cold in her hand, the stars above a map of possibilities and pain. The hospital loomed behind her, its lights a reminder of the life she'd lost, and the one she might yet reclaim. Rain lashed the Thompson mansion's driveway, a relentless curtain of silver that blurred the estate's golden glow into a watery haze. The night was a symphony of storm, the wind howling through manicured hedges, the asphalt slick with the city's restless tears. Naomi Carter stood alone, her navy uniform soaked, clinging to her like a second skin. Her suitcase sat at her feet, a modest sentinel of her 3 years in this house, its leather worn but unyielding, much like her spirit. Her dark eyes, usually steady with a mother's resolve, glistened under the faint streetlight, reflecting a grief older than the storm. In her pocket, Leora's drawing pressed against her thigh, its creased edges a silent anchor to a daughter lost, a love unbroken. The mansion loomed behind her, its windows like unblinking eyes watching, judging, as if the house itself belonged to Vivian's world of curated perfection. Vivian Thompson emerged from the shadowed archway, her cream coat pristine beneath, a black umbrella, her blonde hair untouched by the rain's chaos. Her face was a mask of control, but her hands trembled, betraying a flicker of guilt beneath her icy resolve. She'd overheard Naomi and Lydia in the hospital lot, the USB drives, truth a threat to the empire of lies she'd built. Her heels clicked against the wet stone, each step a declaration of authority, but her eyes avoided Naomi's, as if meeting them would unravel her. "You crossed a line, Naomi," she said, her voice cold, trembling with the weight of her fear of exposure, of losing the social throne she'd crafted. "We don't need you anymore." The words were sharp, meant to sever, but they faltered, her breath catching as if she sensed the fracture in her own facade. Naomi stood taller, her suitcase a quiet defiance, her face unreadable, but her jaw tight. "I understand, ma'am," she said, her voice steady, a shield forged from years of swallowing pain. She'd known this moment was coming since Eli's outburst, since his small voice had shattered Vivian's perfect narrative. Her fingers brushed the drawing in her pocket, Leora's smile a reminder of why she'd endured this house's cold rules, its silent erasures. She'd poured her unspent love into Eli, not to steal him but to keep her heart alive, to mother where loss had carved a void. The rain stung her skin, but she didn't flinch, her dignity aflame no storm could douse. A cry pierced the night, raw and desperate, cutting through the rain's relentless drum. Eli burst from the mansion's side door, barefoot, his pajamas sodden, his small frame splashing through puddles. "Naomi, don't go," he wailed, his voice breaking with a child's unfiltered grief. His brown curls plastered to his forehead, his asthma inhaler clutched in one hand, his eyes wide with panic. He barreled into Naomi, his arms wrapping around her waist, his face buried in her rain-soaked dress. "Please, don't go," he sobbed, his words muffled, his small body trembling against her. Naomi dropped to her knees, the suitcase forgotten, her hands cupping his tear-streaked face. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her voice thick with love, "you'll always be my hero. Be strong for me." Her eyes glistened, but her touch was steady, a mother's promise in every gentle stroke. Vivian's umbrella tilted, rain grazing her coat as she stepped forward, her face flushed with a cocktail of embarrassment and fury. "Eli, stop this," she snapped, her voice sharp but fraying, her hands twitching as if to pull him away. "You're making a scene." Her words echoed her earlier reprimand at the party, but here, in the storm's raw chaos, they felt hollow. Powerless against Eli's truth, she glanced back at the mansion, where a maid's silhouette hovered in the doorway, watching, judging. Vivian's heart sank, her fear of losing control of her son, her image tightening like a noose. "It's for the best," she said, more to herself than Naomi, her voice barely audible over the rain. "For all of us." A flicker of guilt crossed her face, but she hardened, turning away, her umbrella a shield against the moment's weight. Eli clung tighter, his sobs shaking his frail frame. "I want you to stay," he whimpered, his voice breaking, his inhaler slipping to the ground. Naomi retrieved it, her hand steady despite the storm, and pressed it into his palm. "You'll be okay, sweet boy," she said, her voice a lullaby. "Against the wind. Remember what I taught you, breathe slow, love big." She kissed his forehead, her lips warm against his cold skin, a final gift of warmth in a world that felt colder by the second. Rising, she smoothed her dress, the rain blending with tears she refused to let fall. Vivian stepped closer, her hand reaching for Eli, but he pulled away, his eyes locked on Naomi, his small heart breaking in the open. Naomi picked up her suitcase, its weight heavier than its contents, and turned toward the gate. Her footsteps were deliberate, each one a quiet rebellion against the mansion's rules, against Vivian's erasure. "I'll start packing my things," she said simply, her voice soft but resolute, a final act of dignity. Vivian gave a curt nod, her umbrella tilting further, rain now streaking her coat. Eli's cries followed Naomi, each sob a dagger in her heart, echoing the loss of Leora, the daughter she couldn't save. She didn't look back, her head held high, her silhouette fading into the storm's embrace. The mansion's gates loomed ahead, not a barrier, but a release, a threshold to a freedom she hadn't yet named. The rain fell harder, washing away the echoes of Eli's pleas, but not the truth they carried. Vivian stood frozen, her umbrella sagging, her face a battleground of guilt and resolve. The maid in the doorway turned away, her eyes wet with unspoken solidarity. The storm raged on, a witness to a love too fierce to be silenced, a truth too bright to be drowned. The gala hall shimmered like a constellation fallen to earth, its vaulted ceilings draped with golden string lights, its tables adorned with orchids and crystal flutes that caught the glow of 1,000 candles. The air hummed with the clink of glasses and the polished laughter of the city's elite, their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos a parade of wealth and ambition. The charity event, hosted by Vivian Thompson, was less about goodwill and more about spectacle, a stage for her to solidify her place among the social gods. She glided through the crowd, her blush-pink gown flowing like a whisper, her blonde hair a crown of elegance. Her smile was a weapon, disarming donors with practiced charm, but her eyes darted restlessly, as if guarding a secret too heavy to hold. The memory of Naomi's dismissal in the rain lingered, a crack in her perfect facade, and the USB drive Lydia had given Naomi loomed like a storm on the horizon. At the room's edge, Naomi Carter stood, her navy uniform replaced by a simple black dress, her presence almost invisible amid the glitter. She'd come at Lydia's insistence, her hands clasped tightly, the weight of Leora's drawing in her pocket grounding her. Her dark eyes, usually steady, flickered with unease, the hospital footage a truth she wasn't sure she could wield. Eli, in a tiny tuxedo, stood near the dessert table, his red balloon replaced by a small inhaler tucked in his pocket. His eyes found Naomi, a spark of recognition lighting his pale face, but Vivian's hand on his shoulder kept him tethered to her side. "Smile, darling," she murmured, her voice low, her grip a silent command to uphold her narrative. Eli's lips twitched, but his gaze stayed on Naomi, a quiet rebellion brewing in his small heart. The gala's centerpiece was a massive screen, meant to showcase the charity's work, its surface dark until the event coordinator signaled the start of the presentation. The lights dimmed, the jazz quartet faded, and all eyes turned upward. But the screen flickered to life with an unexpected image. Grainy ER footage, the chaos of 3 years ago unfolding in stark clarity. Naomi's face appeared, her hands moving with desperate precision, stabilizing Eli's breathing as monitors. Screamed. Vivian was nowhere in sight, her absence a glaring truth. The crowd gasped, their murmurs rising like a tide. A donor whispered, "That's not Vivian." Another raised a phone, the red dot of a recording blinking. Vivian's smile froze, her champagne flute trembling, her face paling as if the ground had shifted beneath her. She spun toward the event coordinator, her eyes wild, her voice a hushed hiss. "Turn it off. Now." The coordinator fumbled with the controls, shrugging helplessly, the video beyond her reach. Vivian's heart pounded, her carefully curated world crumbling under the weight of the truth. She'd built her reputation on the lie of saving Eli, a shield against her childhood's neglect, but now the socialite in the pearl gown turned away, her approval slipping like sand through Vivian's fingers. The footage looped, Naomi's hands a beacon of heroism, her face etched with determination. The crowd's whispers grew sharper, their phones capturing every second. A viral storm brewing in real time. Eli broke free from Vivian's grip, his small frame darting through the sea of gowns and suits. He climbed onto a chair by the screen, his voice ringing out clear and defiant. "That's Naomi," he shouted, pointing at the footage, his eyes blazing with loyalty. "She's my real mom, my forever hero." The room fell silent, a pin-drop hush swallowing the murmurs. Guests stared, their glasses forgotten, their faces a mix of shock and awe. Naomi stood frozen, her breath catching, her eyes glistening, as Eli's words echoed the love she'd poured into him, a love born from Leora's loss. Vivian's face contorted, her mask of composure cracking, her hand reaching for Eli but stopping short, as if his truth was a fire she couldn't touch. Lydia Moreno, standing among the crowd, nodded at Naomi, her sharp eyes alight with quiet triumph. She'd slipped the footage to the coordinator, a calculated move to right the wrong she'd witnessed years ago. "You deserve this," she mouthed, her blazer catching the light as she stood firm. Naomi's hand tightened around drawing in her pocket, Leora's smile a silent strength urging her forward. She stepped into the light, her black dress simple but radiant, her presence no longer invisible. The crowd parted, their whispers softening, a few clapping tentatively, their phones still recording. A guest murmured, "She's the nanny?" Another replied, "She's more than that." Vivian's voice broke the silence, desperate and shrill. "It's a misunderstanding," she said, her tone pleading, her eyes darting to the socialite, who now avoided her gaze. "I was there for Eli, always." But the words fell flat, drowned by the footage's truth and Eli's unwavering loyalty. She signaled the coordinator again, her hands shaking, but the screen played on, a relentless mirror of her lie. The yo. Guests' murmurs grew, their phones a chorus of red dots capturing her unraveling. Eli climbed down, running to Naomi, his arms wrapping around her waist, his face buried in her dress. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice a quiet vow, his inhaler clutched tightly. Naomi knelt, her hand brushing his cheek, her eyes wet but steady. "You're my brave boy," she said, her voice soft, a lullaby against the chaos. The gala resumed, its rhythm faltering, the jazz quartet striking a lighter note. Vivian stood alone, her blush gown now a spotlight on her isolation, her hands trembling as she clutched her flute. The crowd's eyes shifted to Naomi, a woman they'd overlooked, now radiant in the truth of her heroism. The screen faded to black, but the moment lingered, a fault line cracked wide open by a child's love and a truth too bright to be dimmed. The night beyond the gala hall was alive with the city's restless heartbeat, its streets slick with the sheen of recent rain, neon signs casting jagged reflections like shattered dreams. The air crackled with the scent of wet asphalt and the distant hum of traffic, a world indifferent to the drama spilling from the gilded venue. Naomi Carter stood at the edge of the chaos, her black dress a quiet rebellion against the strobe of reporters' cameras, their flashes slicing through the darkness like blades. Her hands, steady as ever, brushed the worn drawing of Leora in her pocket, its soft edges a silent prayer anchoring her to a love that endured beyond loss. The gala's seismic revelation, Eli's defiant cry, the ER footage bearing her heroism, still pulsed in her veins, a truth that had toppled Vivian's lie and set the world ablaze. Naomi's eyes, dark and unyielding, lifted to the stars, seeking Leora's light amid the city's glare. Inside the hall's opulent foyer, Vivian Thompson stood like a statue cast in shame, her blush-pink gown a cruel spotlight on her unraveling. Her phone, gripped in trembling hands, glowed with a torrent of notifications, each one a wound to her crumbling empire. The video of Naomi saving Eli, now a viral inferno, scorched across screens globally, its hashtag #NashDoshNaomi, the hero a battle cry. Vivian Thompson lied about her son's survival, one post seethed, shared thousands of times. Naomi Carter is the true mother, another declared, paired with Eli's voice. She's my forever hero. Vivian's breath hitched, her fingers scrolling through the digital onslaught, each comment a shard of her shattered facade. A donor, his cufflinks glinting, passed by without a nod, his eyes cold. The socialite, once her beacon of approval, whispered to a companion, "She's ruined." Vivian's heart raced, her eyes stinging as she stared at the screen, frozen on a tweet. How could she steal a nanny's truth? She'd spun the tale of saving Eli to fill the void of her loveless childhood, to claim the adoration she'd never known. But now it was dust, her social crown crushed by a child's loyalty. She fumbled with her phone, desperate to call her PR team, but her fingers faltered, the device's glow illuminating her face, a portrait of a woman undone by her own hunger for control. "I did it for us," she murmured, her voice a ghost. In the foyer's marble chill, but the words rang hollow, drowned by the city's relentless pulse. Outside, reporters swarmed Naomi like vultures, their microphones thrust forward, their voices a frenzied chorus. "Ms. Carter, give us your side," a journalist demanded, her camera flashing. Naomi's gaze, calm but piercing, met hers briefly before turning skyward, as if Leora's spirit danced among the stars. "The truth speaks for itself," she said, her voice steady, slicing through the clamor like a lighthouse beam. "I don't chase fame." She stepped back, her black dress melding with the night, her words a quiet defiance against the spotlight's pull. A young onlooker, phone, raised, captured her reply, posting it online with the caption, "Naomi Carter doesn't need a stage. She's already a star." The clip exploded, fusing with the gala footage in a tidal wave of justice. The crowd beyond the reporters buzzed, their phones aglow like a galaxy of truth, each screen amplifying Naomi's story. Comments surged, caregivers sharing their unseen labors, parents praising Naomi's love for Eli, strangers demanding Vivian's accountability. A post from a Haitian nurse read, "Naomi saved lives in Port-au-Prince until they broke her." The hashtag roared, a symphony of voices lifting Naomi from the shadows. Yet she remained apart, her eyes distant, her fingers tracing Leora's, drawing. Fame was a fleeting shadow. She wanted Eli to know who'd saved him, for Leora's memory to breathe in the love she gave. Her heart yearned for the boy inside, his small voice a warmth that cut through the night's bite. Vivian, alone in the foyer, watched the storm through the glass doors, her phone buzzing with unanswered pleas from her circle. Her inbox overflowed with media demands, each one a call for a reckoning she couldn't face. A donor's wife, her pearls gleaming, passed by, muttering, "What a disgrace." Vivian's breath grew shallow, her hands trembling as she scrolled through comments. Fraud, liar, shame. She'd fired Naomi to silence the USB's threat, to protect her image, but now that image was rubble, her lie exposed by a video's clarity and a child's heart. She clutched her phone, its light a harsh mirror, reflecting a woman trapped by her own desperation. Naomi slipped further into the night, the reporter's shouts fading as she reached a quiet corner. Lydia Moreno appeared, her blazer catching. The streetlights glow, her eyes warm with pride. "The world's with you now," Lydia said, her voice soft but resolute. Naomi shook her head, her lips curving faintly. "It's not their world I care for," she said, her tone laced with a lullaby's quiet strength. "It's Eli's and Leora's." Lydia nodded, her gaze a silent vow of support. The city's lights pulsed around them, a tapestry of hope. But Naomi's heart was with Eli, his love a beacon no fame could eclipse. The gala's splendor dimmed behind her, its opulence a fading dream. Naomi stood tall, her silhouette a canvas of resilience, her hand still holding Leora's memory. The viral backlash thundered, a tide of justice sweeping away Vivian's lies. But Naomi walked away, her steps unwavering, her dignity a quiet crown. The stars above whispered Leora's name, a promise that love, not fame, was her eternal legacy. The late afternoon sun bathed the corner of a quiet street in a soft golden glow, its rays spilling through the windows of a modest brick building that hummed with life. The Leora Clinic stood as a beacon of hope, far from the glittering suburbs and gated estates. its facade adorned with colorful handprints in every shade, a tapestry of joy woven by small hands. A simple sign above the door read, Leora Clinic, free respiratory care for kids. Its bold blue letters a quiet vow to heal. Inside, the air was alive with the laughter of children, the rustle of crayon-streaked pages, and the gentle creak of a rocking chair where Naomi Carter sat, a clipboard. In one hand, a stuffed bear in the other, her gray sweater, speckled with glitter from a morning art project, was a far cry from the navy uniform of the Thompson mansion, her presence now a heartbeat, not a shadow. Naomi's dark eyes, once guarded by grief, sparkled with purpose as she tied a shoelace for a small girl, her fingers steady with the tenderness of a mother who'd never stopped loving. The clinic was her sanctuary, born from the ashes of her past. A disgraced doctor in Haiti, a nanny erased by privilege, a woman who'd lost her daughter, Leora, to a merciless fever. Yet here, in this humble space, she'd stitched her pain into purpose, creating a haven for children whose wheezes echoed Eli's, whose shy smiles reminded her of Leora's. The walls were lined with drawings, houses, sons, stick-figure families, each one a testament to trust rebuilt. A reading nook shaped like a treehouse cradled a boy who clutched an inhaler, his eyes wide as Naomi read aloud, her voice a melodic lullaby that softened the room's edges. And the star shone brighter because she never gave up. Naomi read, her tone warm, her hand resting gently on the boy's shoulder. The child smiled, his breathing easier, his trust in her a quiet miracle. She glanced up, catching the gaze of a girl who whispered a secret about a lost toy. And Naomi listened, her nod a promise to help. The clinic buzzed with small, unseen moments, shoelaces tied, fears soothed, inhalers adjusted, each one a thread in the tapestry of care she wove. Gone was the mask of restraint she'd worn inside Eisen, the Thompson mansion. Here, her laughter was unguarded, her presence complete, a woman no longer silenced by someone else's story. Above her desk hung a simple frame, its contents a wrinkled crayon drawing, torn at one corner. Two stick figures held hands under. A son labeled me and Naomi my real mom. Eli's handiwork, drawn before her dismissal, was a relic of a bond that had shattered Vivian's lies. Naomi's fingers brushed the frame, her eyes softening, not with validation but with remembrance. Eli's voice, his cry of "she's my forever hero" at the gala, still echoed in her heart, a flame that warmed her through the storm of her departure. She hadn't seen him since, but his love lived in this clinic, in every child she held, every breath she steadied. The room pulsed with life, its rhythm a stark contrast to the Thompson mansion's sterile grandeur. A girl with braids tugged Naomi's sleeve, showing off a drawing of a house with a rainbow roof. "For you," she said, her voice shy but proud. Naomi smiled, pinning it to a corkboard already bursting with color. "It's perfect," she said, her voice thick with warmth, her eyes glistening with the joy of being seen, not as a nanny or a scapegoat, but as a healer, a mother in spirit. A boy, his inhaler in hand, flinched at a loud noise, and Naomi crouched beside him, her hand steadying his. "Breathe slow, love big," she whispered, echoing the words she'd given Eli, a mantra that bridged her past and present. Outside, the street was quiet, the city's clamor a distant murmur. The clinic's windows glowed like lanterns, each pane catching the movement of joy within, small hands waving paintbrushes, giggles bouncing off walls, a volunteer tying a shoelace with patient fingers. Naomi moved through the rooms like a gentle current, her gray sweater a canvas of glitter and love. She paused to help a child adjust an inhaler, her hands precise, a doctor's skill reborn in a new form. The clinic wasn't grand. Its budget stretched thin, but it was hers, built not for perfection but for presence, a place where children weren't props but souls, each one seen, each one held. Offers had come, publishers wanting her memoir, nonprofits seeking her leadership, a city council member promising funding for a larger center. Naomi had declined them all, choosing to start small, to stay close to the children who needed her most. Fame, like the reporter's cameras at the gala, was a fleeting shadow. Love was eternal. She glanced at Eli's drawing, its crayon lines a reminder of why she'd fought, not for glory, but for truth, for the boy who'd called her mom, for the daughter who'd never left her heart. A volunteer, her apron dusted with flour from a baking project, approached with a letter. "From Vivian Thompson," she said, her voice hesitant. Naomi opened it, her eyes scanning the formal text. A donation to the clinic, a gesture cloaked in excuses about scheduling conflicts. She set it aside without comment, her focus returning to a child's laughter. Vivian's world of privilege was a distant echo, irrelevant here where love, not money, built homes. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that danced with the breeze, the clinic's windows glowing brighter, a lighthouse in a world that often forgot its smallest souls. Naomi gathered the children in the main room, a book in hand, her voice rising and falling like a song. One nestled against her shoulder, another tugged her sleeve, their trust a quiet revolution. She read on, her hand turning pages, her heart full. The Leora Clinic wasn't just a place. It was a legacy, stitched from pain, lit by love, a testament to a woman who'd turned erasure into embrace, who'd made a home where every child was seen, every breath a victory. What did this story awaken in you? Was it Naomi's strength, Eli's courage, or the quiet justice that finally spoke louder than privilege? If this story moved you, if you saw truth, love, or even a piece of yourself, please share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from and what moment struck you the most. Thank you for joining us on this journey of truth, resilience, and the power of a mother's love. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a story that matters. Until next time, stay kind, stay bold, and remember, even in silence, love speaks.